I will pass it off to our Day 3 moderator, Jane, who is the World Beyond War Nigeria chapter coordinator. So take it away, Jane.
Yeah, greetings everyone. I'm Obi Jane from Nigeria. I'll be the moderator for today. Thanks, Guy. Thanks, Greater and World Beyond One for giving me this opportunity to moderate today. I like being a time manager, and we are set to spend 2 hours. Remember, today is weekend. We left so many things to be here, but not at all. We will not miss everything we need to say. It's Day 3 of reimagining Africa. Africa have saw a lot of setback in development, peace building efforts. Today we are going to talk, rub mind, see and chant the way forward. I welcome everyone in today's meeting as we discuss and chant way forward for Africa development, Africa future. With this, I will be having the opening section, reflection on the possible support for African development. As I welcome Mr. Alex, Dr. Alex McAdams to speak on this. Please, Doctor, can you take the lead? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex McAdams. I'm the Development Director at World Beyond War. So thrilled to be able to join you all and speak to fundraising a bit, although I apologize I'm not able to do this live, so I won't be able to take any direct questions, but I know some of my colleagues hopefully will be there and can help answer some of them, or we can be in touch after the conference, and I'm happy to talk to anyone or provide more tools. So if you want to jot it down quickly, since I'm not able to add it in the chat, but perhaps someone can do that. My email address is Alex, which is ALEX, at WorldBeyondWar.org. And again, feel free after this to reach out to me anytime. Happy to talk fundraising. Anyway, so before we get started on this, I wanted to quickly update you about an exciting development update. I'm thrilled that our team is growing. This is sort of relevant to this conference. Our development intern is located in Kenya, and he is helping me expand, potentially grow our fundraising base, work on different research projects, individual donor projects. So as that role develops a bit more, if any of you would like to be in touch with him as well, he's wonderful, and I can facilitate that introduction as well. But that's just an exciting update for the World Beyond War development team, and hoping it helps expand not only the anti-war movement, but also will result in some more fundraising, some more funding to help support our efforts. So welcome all of you. Thank you so much for being here and joining us to talk about everyone's favorite subject, fundraising. It's the biggest challenge, I would say. Talking about fundraising generally in the peace and security movement is always pretty difficult, and frankly can be incredibly frustrating. It's very hard to fundraise from an institutional perspective for funding to support peace building work. And I think in Africa, there's maybe some more nuanced little bits, which we'll get to later in this conversation. But at this point, you should have learned a bit more about the work World Beyond War is doing, how the chapters are growing throughout Africa, how you could maybe help start a chapter, overall challenges in the peace building work in Africa. I know Shane spoke about the potential for peace building partnerships. That's a really important piece that's also connected to fundraising, so we'll get to that later. I want to sort of hone in on the challenge to peace building work in Africa. I think a big piece of that is sustainable fundraising and funding. And another point is the role of partnerships in that. So we'll get there, but first I want to give sort of an overall view quickly of the international peace and security fundraising landscape. I think that will help set context here. So there's just starting with, there's a group called the Peace and Security Funders Group. It's sort of a go-to for me to look at, to try to be in touch with people. It's a member-based organization, and it's all funders. A lot of them are based in the US, but it's funders who do international peace and security funding. So I encourage everyone just to take a look at that, to see who, there's a full list, a comprehensive list on their website that shows all of the members. And I think it's really helpful to see the list of funders who are, doing some work. A lot of them are big picture. So a little bit different than what we all here will be discussing for chapters, although I think it's still important to see that list, to think about any possible connections. You never know when and who you might come across through other funding sources. So that's a good place to look. They do a lot of research along with another organization called Candid, it was formerly Foundation Center and Charity Navigator, I think. They merged. It's now a larger group that offers information and background on foundations, so you can subscribe to their research database that allows you to pull up really, granular research on, this is the foundation, this is the location that we want, this is the work we're doing, this is the size of our organization. So you can really customize it to do searches. It is, I would say, cost prohibitive. It's incredibly expensive for smaller grassroots organizations, but I just wanted to fill everyone in. There is sometimes, I think they still do offer a free version where you can do sort of preliminary searches. So it's worth checking out. So if you look up either Foundation Center or Candid, you will find that. Candid does a lot of research. And what they've found, along with the Peace and Security Funders Group, is that funding for peace and security remains really relatively small to overall foundation funding internationally. I think there was one finding that peace and security grant making represented just 1.2% of the nearly $33 billion. Candid looked at a research set of 1,000 large US grant making foundations, and with the total of $33 billion, and peace and security was getting just 1.2% of that. Obviously, that's tiny. There's some concern also in the foundation world or philanthropy world that some of the big players are actually removing themselves. Most recently, there's the MacArthur Foundation that is located in Chicago, Illinois, in the United States, does international fundraising. They had a massive portfolio for supporting work around nuclear arms. They actually, as this year, they pulled out of that space, and it has resulted in a lot of panic. They actually supported 45% of the international grant making around nuclear work. So this is obviously concerning. They weren't seeing, there's a huge analysis for it. You could look it up. I think it's fascinating in terms of thinking about how grant makers are thinking about supporting peace and security. And while this is sort of more niche because it's very specific to nuclear, I still think it's really kind of sets a tone for the overall fundraising landscape or funding landscape on peace and security. So look it up, MacArthur Foundation pulling out of nuclear. You'll find lots of articles. Politico did one not that long ago, but their conclusion was that they didn't feel like they could point to any tangible differences being made and what they expected to happen over the course of a set amount of years that they were funding. And so they didn't, while they're, as foundations do, shift priorities sometimes based on need and things happening in the world, they felt that their resources could be better used. Obviously, this is devastating, and there's lots of arguments to be made that what they anticipated would be accomplished could not have been done within the time frame that they gave. But within that, there's been a lot of other conversations around how there'll be growth of new smaller foundations, and some funds have been created in partnership with other foundations to try to fill that gap. It's obviously a pretty big gap. So there is some burgeoning new grant makers, which is exciting. But anyway, if you go to the Peace and Security Funders group, you'll see that there is a list actually of the largest contributors. And just as note, for example, the Buffett Foundation and Carnegie Corporation are two of, if not the two largest funders of peace and security internationally. Another, interesting thing is that Peace and Security Funders Group, every few years, they do a report about global giving of its members. The last one was done in 2019. I think that means we're set to have a new one from them soon. But they found that 330 foundations made over 2,100 grants, and that totaled $435.4 million in funding. But other researchers have found that of this figure, only 25-ish to maybe 34% of that would go to support Africa, although that's, a quarter. That range has been a little bit different in different sources, but that's still quite a chunk of money going towards Africa. And actually, I'm going to share my screen. There's a really interesting tool. Just give me 1 second. I mentioned earlier Candid. Let's see. They have a really cool tool that you could check out. I hope everyone can see this. They do mapping, which is really cool. It reminds me of the mapping that WorldBeyondWar does. If you haven't seen that, check it out. But this is funding specific mapping. So they do it by issue area or program. So this is their peace and security funding map. And you can actually toggle to have it. This shows, the number of grants, the value of grants, number of funders and recipients, and they show around the world where it's going. And you will see that it looks visually, at least, that majority of the funding is going to the Middle East and Africa. So I really encourage, this is a free tool. You can go in here, you can zoom in and look really specifically at different areas throughout Africa. And you can, if you click on this, you will get a lot more information about what's being funded, by whom, how much, what type of work. You can get incredibly granular with this. And I highly recommend taking a look, because you'll just understand what's being funded out there and by whom. And I think that would be really useful. So I just wanted to point out that within that, before we move on, within that Peace and Security Funders Group report that I mentioned, they actually, which I think is just interesting to note, the most money from that bucket that is for peace and security internationally, the most funded program, they break it down into issue-based things or type of work, is supporting stable, resilient societies. And I just think it's interesting because within that, they list some ideas of what that could be. That's obviously sort of a blanket, larger bucket. And within that, there's things about gender equality, democracy building, rule of law, climate security, accountability, and transparency. And I just think this is interesting because these are all, obviously, it becomes very intersectional issues. And it's interesting to note that, and I just am highlighting that to underscore the importance of partnership building. And I just keep that in your brain for a minute, and we'll get to that to this point. But I do think that this is really, really underscores the need for building partnerships that you might not typically assume you would align with in terms of thinking about fundraising. So, okay, let's see. I think one place to start is to just say that there have been, there's a ton written and researched about the best ways to deal with conflict throughout Africa in terms of funding and how philanthropists think about it. They've shifted over the years due to a variety of things, but what's coming back is really thinking and needing African-led peace operations to address security challenges throughout the continent. So I think that with that in mind, it's really, really important to frame that for funders. And that is, just to share, part of the bigger funder philanthropy conversation. And I know that was a piece that was also discussed at their most recent meeting. All of these members get together once a year for a conference. And that was part of it as well, from what I've heard feedback from funders who attended that. But I think there is really a movement in wanting to figure out the best ways to fund locally led programs that can transform communities. And they do, just as a heads up, people define locally led differently. I mean, it could be regional, it could be within a country, it could be continent. So I think that does shift depending on the scale of any specific conflict that people might be working around, or, if it's more preventative or just, conflict resolution or peace building or education. Those things look differently in terms of what locally led means. For the sake of chapters, a lot of you are here from the Cameroon and other chapters throughout Africa, and looking to hopefully build additional chapters throughout the continent. I think it shifts a little bit different ways of talking about funding. All of us sort of aspire to get long-term sustainable general operating support from foundations and institutions. And sadly, that is incredibly difficult to secure, especially when you are working for and on behalf of an anti-war, anti-militarism, peace building organization. There's often some internal conflicts with foundations. There's things about investments that conflict with our mission. World Beyond War doesn't typically take money from any government agencies or governments, which sort of leaves us with a gap in, so where do we get funding? We have some very trusted and great long-term family foundation supporters, some of whom are on that list that I mentioned from the Peace and Security Funders group. You'll see there. But I think one way to do this, to leverage the expertise, the knowledge, the familiarity with what is happening on the ground in your communities, is to partner with other groups. So whether they are also similarly peace building, but maybe they're doing something different, maybe they're project specific, maybe they're a larger organization that does lots of different things in your community. Peace building might be just one sector of their overall programming. They might not have anything to do that they think explicitly with peace building, but they might be doing something about gender equality, violence against women, things of that nature that might intersect, that you could actually find alignment within your work. And if you work together to come up and collaborate with a proposal, you will have a much stronger case for foundations to get funding. Another thing is that a lot of big foundations who do international, especially peace building or conflict resolution work, particularly those in the United States, which I'm most familiar with. There's plenty of others around the world, but there's definitely a massive pipeline of billions of dollars being funded from US funders. So acknowledging that there's others as well, but just from that frame, a lot of them now in their process, while they're trying to figure out how to best support local on the ground peace building organizations throughout Africa, are coming up with a process that sort of alleviates the administrative piece, which is hallelujah. That's welcome and great. Anyone who's written grants or gone through any sort of fundraising process with institutional funders knows the headaches that it can cause and the bureaucratic red tape. So alleviating any administrative processes is welcome. Another one is that, so in doing that, for sort of credibility or looking to make sure that they're putting their funds into an organization who has a reputation of doing the work they're doing, they're often asking for referrals. So another way to do that is to work with partnerships, even on a local project, and build your network of referrals that you can build up and have people speak to your work. And another key point I would say is to build relationships with local journalists and media sources. Really work those relationships and grow those relationships if you can. I think that would lend itself to having huge credibility with funders. Fortunately for the chapters here, given that you are connected to World Beyond War, the larger umbrella global organization, that in itself lends itself to having credibility, which is excellent. We are trying to get sort of the more formalized credibility in different countries by having some sort of status. Right now, we have it in the US only. We do have a nonprofit status in Canada, but we're working to expand that. It's our long-term goal. But regardless, I think, World Beyond War is out there on the front lines. We are known, we are respected. So by being part of that large organization, you have one form of credibility and one organization on your reference list. So that's a great start. Anyway, I just highlight that to, really emphasize that building relationships are really important, and, making cross-network connections with other local peer organizations that might be working in different contexts could have insight into even opportunities that you didn't know were out there. So encourage you to work with your community organizations, and you never know what might come out of that. Okay, I'm going to share now, just have a couple more minutes. And just quickly go through a couple slides. Okay, hopefully you all can see this. Let's see. These are sort of I'm just going to breeze through this. And I should say, as just a disclaimer, this is part of a larger fundraising training that I recently did with chapters. Guy was actually present at that. That is available, or should be available, on our website in the chapter resources. So if you would like to watch the entire full fundraising training, please do that. And again, reach out to me if you have any questions or you want to brainstorm or talk through some specific ideas. I know one point that you might all be interested in is how you can plug into other funding opportunities and things. And I think that's really specific to the work being done or what your goals are. So please reach out and we can talk about that. But these are some ideas quickly. Donations, individual donations are huge. Events, a lot of the chapters, so looking at chapters now that have fundraised, they have held local, events in their local communities. I think that that's huge, and I'll get more into that just very quickly in a minute. And then there's grants. Going through this, when you're looking at donors, you want to really take into account their linkage to you and the work you're being done, their interest or their ability to give. That is, I get more into that specifically in this fundraising training that you can check out, that's free to watch. But here's some events. I think this would be really great for the chapters there. And this there's some really good examples of our chapters now who have held fundraising events that were really successful. And I think replicating those ideas is a great idea. And I think they can be done anywhere in whatever country context, of raising any sort of awareness along with hopefully raising some money is a great thing and has tremendous value. I think even amplifying our work has a lot of value. So there's the typical pass the hat at any event you have. You could do it virtually. In a meeting, you can, at any sort of event, you can ask people to just make a small donation. Excuse me. You could do a direct appeal to a local business, a person that you think might be interested and might have the capacity to give. In the States, you could do a Facebook fundraiser. I'm not actually sure how that works in other countries, so I'm just going to skip over that. In other, I think maybe they've just started extending it to other countries, but I'm not sure about that. But you could do some sort of virtual fundraiser. A big one is starting a book club or a study group. A lot of people have done this. I know at one point our California chapter did a study group about the AGSS that was really successful. Our Wisconsin chapter held an event, a wreath making event around the holidays. That was really successful. You can just hold a small cultivation event. You could have a dinner party. You could make a dish that is known in your community that you want to share with people. You could do it online to broaden your audience. You could play games and have that be an event. You could do a small concert and have that be a fundraising event. Sports, you could get sports teams to sponsor you in a game. All of these there's lots of ideas, and a lot of them, I know other chapters of ours have done film events where they've, asked for a small fee for tickets, and that was successful. Also, many of them have invited speakers to a meeting or event, and that's always a really great idea that you could do. Also, as well, you could do it in person or virtually or both. You could do a hybrid. So those are some events that you could see just going through it, that there's lots of information here for you to look at. Here is the page where you can get into it more. And again, please feel free to reach out. I am leaving you all. I hope the rest of the conference goes well. Thank you so much to Guy for inviting me, and please reach out with any questions, and have a great rest of the conference. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for taking us this. I know time we have a lot to say, and actually, like you said, finance is the bedrock of a society. Without money, without finance, we can't do anything. And I said, building relationship is very key, because peace is everybody's business. So without wasting time, we'll be going to the next section that talks about conditions for peace building in Africa. Taking a look from the international, the European country, as I invite Wolfgang to take us to this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Wolfgang. I'm a German, and I'm already above 70. But since 50 years for peace and international justice active, I put all my energy inside. Our background, Germany was a big responsible for 2 world wars. And we had a regime, the National Socialists, we tried to occupy the whole world. So our generation had the task to find a way out, that it will never come again. So, and this was how I saw it. We had to fight with our parents, with the teachers. Yeah, they were all, we can say there was a nationalistic, national socialistic society in Germany, even if the head was changed, democratic, yeah. But in fact, the prejudice were our old people were inside. They have injected them too much when they were young. It was only maybe 10% of population were even liberal. So, and you could talk with them that maybe it was a mistake what they have done. Yeah. So with Africa, I formed a group Black and White, and we went in German schools with African refugees. For many Germans, it was the first time that they came in direct personal contact with Africans. So they had a chance to overcome their prejudice. And I think the personal way is the most important way, develop personal relationships. This way we tried, because there were a lot of attacks on refugees in Germany. So we tried on this way to find it, and connected culture, drumming, dancing, and political information, how the world was divided in the last 500 years by the European colonial masters, and try to mobilize and to be active for the implementation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and see us as one human family with equal rights for all members, and our responsibility to organize such a world. And now I got a heritage of my family. They had a factory making their furniture. I didn't want to continue, but now I have the empty factory and want to make it to an international peace center, where people, step by step, we develop rooms and have formed an association that step by step we bring people together. We had already a seminar with Algerians who are in the diaspora trying to support their people at home. You know, in war areas and in dictatorships, it's not easy to be active. So the diaspora plays a big role. So we want also to give here a place that people can meet, come in contact, and support their people at home. But now I want to give you my knowledge, what I've learned, why Europe, you know, was a continent of nearly permanent wars. Yeah, it was never a peaceful country. And you know, both world wars, they made more or less who get the most influence on the world, who can control most areas, and they fought each other. Which shares, how they share the world among each other. So they made big world wars. And but Europe, even before inside, we had a lot of wars. And now I will speak and try. We have naturally some scientists and activists who had ideas what were the reasons and how we overcome it. And I think there are maybe some similarities with the situation in Africa. No? But I don't want to say that what we have learned and know, you should copy it. No? Just to give you my ideas, what I've learned, what is important, and then you can take what you want and what not, what is important or might be important for you. So I will share now my presentation. There are not many slides, yeah. And then please, I will read my presentation. I wrote it in German. My English is not so perfect. I don't have so many words. So I have to read it. So, and sure, some words I don't pronounce it in the correct way. So I beg your mercy, but I try my best. Okay, now I will share the screen and then I will talk to it. So Waldemar, let me see. I think this is the one. So, now we have to go backwards. Okay, you see it all, yeah?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So, first of all, peace is not a gift. You have to work for it. This is the lesson which the core message of the German but a better cosmopolitan philosopher Immanuel Kant. His book, The Perpetual Peace, I think can be interesting for everyone. It was for me one of the eye-openers. And he wrote it 200 years ago, and later I will come back on it. We can distinguish between the inner peace among people in organized regions, groups, and states, and the external relations between them, the outer peace. I will start with the inner peace in the states. It has prevailed in most Western countries since 1945, but is now increasingly under threat as the event surrounding the last change of government in the US have shown. I base my concept for inner peace primarily on the German peace researcher Dr. Dieter Sengers and his model of the civilizational hexagon derived from European development. The merge of states with inner peace in Europe. After 30 years of war in Europe, and every third German, for example, died in it, in the 17th century, in the loose political union of the Holy Roman Empire, national states slowly emerged in Europe. This happened first in France, which became the first great power in Europe. It succeeded by brutally subjugating all dissenting forces on its territory and expelling them from the territory, and deliberately destabilizing the old order and its other regions. The other states followed suit in defense against French superiority. And after the Second World War, and the weakening of the European European colonial empires, the model of the state, either as a nation state or a multi-ethnic state, prevailed worldwide. In the European regions, the strongest economic and military power prevailed in this development of the states and established a monopoly of the use of force by the state it formed. Only it had the right to use weapons. This was the first condition for peaceful development in the regions, because only one power had weapons, and conflicts could be no longer be carried out violently. However, this monopoly could now be used by the victors for their arbitrary exercise of power, and thus also provoke other forces to take up weapons again. In these regions, the opposition forces struggled for the rule of law, to limit the power of the rulers, and for equal rights for all in the area. The rule of law is the second condition for peace and the preservation of peace, alongside the preservation of the monopoly on the use of force. But even this can still be a struggle between elites for their share of the privileges and at the expense of the masses of people, and this conflict can escalate into violence again. There are therefore two further conditions for peace: the equal democratic participation of all people in political decisions, and thus their opportunities to bring their interests to bear, the possibility as thereby to assert social perspectives for all. This requires the underprivileged to organize themselves for their interests, and an understanding throughout the society that only the democratic participation of all and the security of decent living conditions for all, and thus also for the previous privileged, can ensure peace in the long term. This requires an awareness of interdependence, which is the fifth condition. The sixth condition is learning from childhood to resolve conflicts by peaceful means, and building institutions that can ensure just conflict resolution by peaceful means, and in which people have confidence. Other authors, these are this hexagon, which I told you, sorry that I didn't, and now we come to other conditions for peace. Other authors supplement to the six conditions with further conditions for peace, such as generalization of scientific thinking in the society, the development of self-confident, politically independent and active personalities in the society, many inter-ethnic and inter-regional relationships and dialogues between people in the emerging states, religious dialogue, and the development of a common ethic, a common way of thinking in a society about what is right and wrong, and the intergenerational justice. It means that people do not live today on the expense of the next generation, such as it is in the case of climate destruction. In Europe, urbanization, the development of cities and industries have contributed to inner peace. They enabled personal encounter between people of different parts of the country. This made it possible to overcome prejudices and divisions, and created the basis for development of a common national identity. The construction of roads and railway lines as a basic for building a common national economy, and the resulting mutual dependencies also contributed to this. It brought with a boost in education. And the concentration of many people in factories and towns gave them more political power to assert their interests against the groups that ruled the economy and the state. They formed trade unions and parties and fought for universal suffrage. The development of these conditions led to lasting peace in states in Europe and other Western countries after 1945. These were enforced about all during and after the two world wars and the suffering that the policies of those in power had brought to the masses of the population. They wanted a policy that would prevent this from happening again. However, they were also enforced by external forces through the policies of the USA and the Soviet Union, with their superior economic and/or military power. They subjugated the European states in ruins and sought to incorporate them into their empires as vassals for their own interests. However, the realization of these lessons and the preservation of the conditions for peace are constantly contested. They can also be lost again, and with them peace, as experienced in Greece after 1945, later in Yugoslavia with the NATO intervention, and now in Ukraine. An important reason for this was and is the reduction in social security for all in Europe. It had improved for everyone after 1945. Since the 1980s, however, it has been increasingly dismantled, and the gap between rich and poor in Europe is growing ever wider. International developments are also a reason for these changes. The high level of prosperity in the West, and thus a condition for peace, lay in the exploitation of the global South, through which much wealth has been redistributed from there to the industrialized countries. Capital and labor in the West have profited from this. The West had the power to do this through its monopoly on industry and industrial arms production, and the large-scale recruitment and financing of large armies made possible by state administrations. Through Russia and China and the political independence of the former colonies and their growing union, the West is losing its dominant power to continue this exploitation and thus maintain the high standard of living at the expenses of other people. This also leads to a reduction in social security and is a background to the new wars in Europe. This is also the background to the rise of radical right-wing anti-democratic movements and parties in many European countries, including Germany, and the threat to the achievements of the post-1945 era and to peace. In Western countries, there's only a minority that realizes that their relatively high standard of living is based on the exploitation of the global South. Only a minority is prepared on this base of the philosophy of the Declaration of Human Rights, on religious and humanist convictions, to commit itself to ending the exploitation of the South and to take serious the voice that sooner or later this will also jeopardize their peace. The West relies on the defense of its privileges by military means, and it's arming itself mightily to this end. To this end, it is wasting public funds that we could be using to secure at least the basic needs of all people worldwide, and to reorganize the economy into one that no longer destroys the natural foundation of life. So I want now short only to come to two authors, which I'm relying on. The first I told you already, Immanuel Kant, the perpetual peace. So he developed one structure, why we had this violent development. He said in his book, The Perpetual Peace, those at the top love war. They can extend their power and do not bear the suffering of war, but live in war as well as in peace. They do not have to kill and die. They do not bear the costs of armament and war guilt. What is our task? We have to make people aware of this contrast of interest between the top and the bottom, to make clear what the real war aims of those at the top are, and which they want to use the people as a means to achieve their goals. They send their subjects to war. They have their diplomats work out good reasons for their desired wars, where they try to convince you. Most times they tell you that other countries are threatening you, so you have to defend themselves. But instead, what they really do is to covering aggressive occupation wars to others. Refute the arguments in favor of war and violence through educational work and by encouraging people to form their own opinions and critically question the arguments of their superiors. Utilizing the possibilities of political intervention to prevent wars. This is not easy, as most people are primarily concerned with their own lives and their immediate environment, and do not understand how it is linked to the international relations. Many only realize its importance when the shooting starts. So then second, the second point was in this state building in Europe, in the state building in Europe, the nationalistic, egoistic foreign policy occurred. In the Roman Empire, the politicians, the deciders, had to legitimize their decisions with Christian values. But then when the French state emerged, the state, they said everything which supports the strength of France is good. Everything that weakens others is good, because it benefits us to assert our interest against them. And this, for me, this development of a national egoistic foreign policy is still there today, and it commands and structures the world. The attempt to overcome national egoism after the Second World War by establishing the UN with a new identity, we are all members of one human family and must ensure that everyone can live in dignity, has not prevailed. It is more used only by the Western world to argument that they want it, but in fact bring their own egoistic programs through by covering it with these general ideas, which they don't, from my point, is not what they do. Yeah, then this I've told you, the perpetual peace. In the first international meeting of the socialist parties in Europe and US, it was the International Congress of the International Working Association in London in 1864. They said the same more or less what Kant says. The rich, they risk your blood and your poverty in their wars. And you as common people, You yourself, even as workers, you have to study the international relations. You have to examine the aims of the rulers in your respective. You have to criticize them if they want to treat other states unmorally. That means to bring through unjust relationships to other countries. You have to go against if your politicians do it, if your ruling class is doing it. Oppose them and develop your own fair proposals of international relations and try to implement them. This is our task as common people, because they said that only if we in our respective states, ethnic groups, oppose attempts by our own rulers to subjugate the other people, will be able to create the necessary international cooperation between people that is needed to liberate humanity. Yeah, this I think is our tasks. What we have to do, we have to overcome the national egoistic thinking, which leads us perhaps in the Third World War and the destruction of mankind. This is a task of us all in every state, to come to a global responsible politics in the interest of mankind. And I tell you all, it will be a hard struggle, because the national egoistic thinkers, naturally, they have much more power. They have much more mainstream. And common people, most time, they don't know the people of other states. So they said, we have to care for ourselves. But in doing this, they destroy the base of mankind, which we have seen in 2 world wars. And so this is our common struggle, and therefore these international networks like World Beyond War are very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wolfgang. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A before we transition to our closing ceremony. I see one question already here from Moses, who says, thanks, Wolfgang, for the great and wonderful history of conflicts in Europe. How can we overcome the dictatorship of those in leadership positions? Difficult question.
Yeah, we have really, the point is, also, warte mal, I have to stop it now. We have really to come together as common people. There's no other chance. Mr. Kant said, these minorities on the top, they will continue to misuse you for their interests if you don't oppose. They come always with new arguments why you should fight their wars for their interests. So enlightenment of the people, political education, and you know, when they make their wars, for example, when they want to go against Libya, they demonize Gaddafi. And we have to oppose it. We have to in the time, the same is with North Korea, everyone who is their enemy. They tell me us all the bad sides of them. So we need a campaign against it and says, please, you want just to bring them down, to bring their interests through. And you just use the inside problems to legitimize this. You are not there for the people. Most time you see the results of their interventions. Most time afterwards is much more horrible than it was before. Yeah, they never bring anything forward. They only want to take from the global south just the independence which they got, which they fought through, back, and to bring them under their control, to get cheap resources. And so this is our task. And most time you have to oppose, because, you know, if they repeat lies again and again, people believe it's true. So you need really courage. If they tell you Putin is a demon and this, and if you want to go against it, how they prepare their wars, it's really a hard task. And we need a lot of courage. And we have to unify with others who have the same ideas to oppose it, that you don't feel alone. And think, so I'm alone, I can't so do nothing. This also, and the learning of the history, where they lied to us, like the Vietnam War. It was a lie how they brought America inside. The Germans, you know, they told them that the Polish and Russian have attacked us. Were all lies. Only the soldiers they saw that they would go in the other countries. There was no attack. Yeah, they lie. You know when the in America they tried to legitimize their war against Kuwait. No? They tell you the soldiers of Iraq come, they take the babies out of the hospital and put them, they lie. And it's very important that we make political education, that people understand the trust in the rulers. Iraq war, you know it all. They have weapons of mass destructions. They lie, and we have one German national socialist who was in Hitler's government at the end of the war. He was interviewed from an American, and he said, naturally, the normal worker can never have interest in a war, but we get you always there. We just tell you the other country want to attack us. And if you say that's not true, they say you don't want that we defend us. You are betraying us. And he said, on this way, independent of dictatorship or democracy, you get the people always a war against their interests. So it is very important that we learn out of this history and give it to others, because the states don't do it, or rare do it. And this is and if we don't do it, we will not unite the masses. And on the other hand, we have also naturally to tell them what I told you. We all pay socially the costs for their wars. We all. Now they bring down, even in Germany, they want now a big armament, bring it up. Naturally, they lie to you that Russia wants to attack us. They lie to you, they bring stories. So, and what I also did in the time of Gorbachev, when he came to power, and then I was journalist, and a journalist from Russia came, the first delegation. And he said Gorbachev has told him that if he meets the German ruler, is not enough. The common people have to come in contact. This only can create the base of peace. So we formed, I told him, go back, look for a town, and then we created a town partnership between a town near Moscow and our region, where I was before in the south of Hessen state, in the middle of Germany. So, and then over years, we had 2 friendship initiatives. We created contacts between policemen of Russia and Germany, of schools, of pupils, of teachers. And on this way, we all have to work on it. This idea, we are one human family. We have to create it in developing relationships between Christian, Muslims, Jews, that they can't play with these divisions anymore with us, and between different nations. There, every one of us can take part in this building, and in Africa, especially overcoming ethnic divisions. Very important. We have to create this space for national states, for inside peace, and everyone can do every day something, that we help our other people to overcome their prejudice. With the rich who want to divide and rule, every day they do the opposite. They try to bring the divisions between us. You know, like this national egoistic thinking. As weaker Africa is, as cheaper I will find my partners to exploit the continent. So they don't believe in their thing. They want peace they don't want it. They want that you are very weak, that you are divided in yourself. And then they support the militias, which give them the resources for weapons. This is especially in Congo, they play this game. Yeah, and you are depending. If you are in a war, you need weapons. So you sell your things to them, and otherwise they tell you, I go to the other militia. So then they fight you. On this way, the same they did in the slave trade, with the different regions. You know, they blackmail you. Either you give me what I want, or I go to the other one, and I go with them against you. So this unification from the base, it is in Europe for us essential to fight our leading classes, to overcome their power, and it is in Africa even more, because your elites, they are corrupted by the industrial countries, and they benefit, they get their share from your resources. They also don't want to change. They don't want to change the system because they profit in your countries and the rich world profits. So both work on it. So it is very difficult because you have, in Europe, when in our state building, we did not have this outside power who intervened. But you in Africa, in the global south, you have, it is a hard struggle. So then, but I naturally, I have hope in you that you, the young generation, will bring it forward. And one point we should know, we have better conditions than every generation before us because of international chances to come in contact, because of languages. You know, our grandparents, parents, most times they could never speak together. They had no language. Today you have French, you have English, you can many countries use to infiltrate or come in contact with people in the rich world. Because, you know, we don't want a big war between the global south and the global north. We need that the people in the rich world to convince them that they also have only peace if we get justice in the world. Now, this is essentially because even we, if we go now in a long struggle with the global south, even here, it will bring down the societies. And you see it now, the refugees, I see it, there's part of Africans. They don't accept their living conditions. And some want to make a political change, which is naturally not easy. Others just say, then I go to the rich world. I said, then it's my way. Then I don't accept to live. And if they want to give me the chance, then I go to the rich world. And this, you know, the racists and right wing, they see this is a big threat to us, and try to bring the democratic values and democracy down in saying, "Cook, these refugees are the threat for us." So this, what I see on one point, way of emancipation of Africans to coming to the rich world, yeah, even brings us down, and they can do what they want against refugees, from my point, without global justice. That the people, even in the global south, have the same chances as we have. They never will get refugees out. They can, at the end, put their armies and kill them. They will come if you don't have a perspective on your country. Yeah, and you see the change in the country is not easy, it's difficult. A lot will go and think it is an easier way to go, even if many of them die, what we know. They die in the desert, they die in the thing, yeah. But if you know, I have no perspective. So therefore, it is very important that we work together and learn from each other. How we can implement this, what is on paper already very good. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UN Charter are very good documents, but we have to organize a global movement to implement them. And this is our common task.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. And there are many comments in the chat thanking you for your very powerful presentation. And we are going to transition now to the next part of the conference, the final part, the closing ceremony. Before we do that, I want to call up Marian, who is going to take a screenshot. For anyone who wants to be in the photo, you can turn your video on now if you'd like to be in it. So Marian, I'll call you up now to take the photo. And if you have a blue peace scarf, you can put that on, or any other symbols of peace, or hold up a peace sign, and we'll take a photo for today.
I'm going to wait a little bit if some people have a hard time to turn on their video. Oh yeah, people are coming now. Shane is there. Mohammed. Any other people? I took one already. Anybody else want to join? No? Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much. And Marian, I'll keep you up here on the mic because I think we've lost Jane. So it's going to go to you to be our backup moderator for the rest of today.
Okay, sorry, excuse me. So yes, now it's already time to closing our conference. So we're going to start with And I think it's a video presentation, or maybe Judith has joined us from Cameroon. She's a member of the Cameroon chapters, and she's going to talk about the African traditional conflict prevention and resolution methods.
Hello, warm greetings to all the peace builders present in this conference. I'm Judith Liwitekon. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to make a presentation on the topic, some traditional methods and tools for conflict resolution in Africa. The main points of this presentation are the following: African oral tradition and culture of peace, interethnic marriages, traditional institutions such as traditional courts and traditional chiefs. Let's start. Africa's encounter with the West has contributed to the loosening of African cultures and traditional knowledge, resulting in a disorientation that makes Africans subject to external contributions in many domains. As a result, when faced with the many conflicts hindering the continent's growth and development, Africans generally think only in terms of imported solutions, which unfortunately prove insufficient and sometimes ineffective. Meanwhile, pre-colonial Africa already abounded in useful tools and techniques for conflict prevention, management, and resolution. Let's have a look on some of those typically African methods. First, the culture of peace in African oral tradition. In the African oral tradition, there are some endogenous conflict prevention and resolution mechanisms. These can be found in resources such as joking relationship, palavers, proverbs, and storytelling. Joking relationship, also known as joking kinship or joking alliance, this system of interethnic solidarity and friendliness is widespread in West Africa. It is a relaxing relationship whose aim is to purge tensions between groups. Here, members of family clans or members of neighboring ethnic groups are called to mock or insult each other. These verbal confrontations, being a means of social decongestion, an effective way of letting off steam to prevent future conflict. In fact, at the end of any joking kinship session, clan or ethnic groups members are freed from their frustration, their discontent, and their resentment. In short, their bags are emptied and the clocks can be reset. Indeed, sociological studies support the idea that joking kinship is a defensive wall against ethnic conflict, since far more than a game, these relationships are a means of diffusing tensions between neighboring ethnic groups and family clans. Proverbs. Once popular in Africa, proverbs are the result of proven experience, result of a practiced and sovereign intelligence, and the result of an unsurpassable truth. In short, proverbs are wisdom. In moral societies in general, words act as powerful brakes on people and society. Yet, Proverbs contain an ethical grammar to guide people towards moral correction. When it comes to preventing or resolving conflict, Proverbs are excellent shortcuts for shedding light, for getting the truth as quickly as possible in order to force a lull, to calm agitated and angry spirits, and finally establish tolerance, solidarity, empathy, and peace. The Palava Tree. In Africa, long before the advent of modern justice as a result of colonization, social problems were settled by Palava. Palava meaning talk, discussion, conversation. The Palava tree was the traditional gathering place under the shade of which people discussed life in society and community problems. As a group therapy, Palava sessions provide an opportunity to get to the roots of the problems, express grievances or feelings, and bury the hatchet. All this for the interest of the whole community. In short, Palava is a framework for organizing contradictory debates, expressing opinions and advices, and deploying various dissuasion and arbitration mechanisms. Storytelling. Beyond their apparent playful function, tales are genuine pedagogical tools used by Africans to inculcate moral virtue, to inculcate a culture of peace and non-violence in the younger generation, and to teach them to discard antisocial values. The tales initiate reason. The tales recount the foundation of things. The tales transmit logic and values. The tales defines codes of behavior for a given society. Tales or storytelling, with its morality and didactic function, could therefore provide a significant solution to the many challenges facing our countries in terms of mentoring the younger generation and educating them in civics and morality. Moreover, inculcating values of peace in the younger generation through storytelling is tantamount to conflict prevention. Good. After this look on the prevention and management of conflict in African oral tradition, let's go to interethnic marriages. Interethnic marriages were used to seal a deep and sincere friendship meaning mutual love, respect, and mutual consideration. Giving or taking one's daughter in marriage from a neighboring village was indirectly a peace pact signed between the two villages or ethnic groups, because no one would henceforth risk going to war against a country that harbors his or her blood. Someone's blood can be his son, his daughter, grandson, nephew, or niece. Traditional courts. Traditional justice mechanisms are types of customary justice that exist at local or community levels and have not been established by the state. They are a set of rules that generally follow the principles of customary law, with the advantage of being trusted by the population and being accessible to the entire indigenous population, unlike state institutions which tend not to escape financial and intellectual discrimination as well as lobbying. Because they were accessible to all, traditional courts made a significant contribution to preserving peace, to settling disputes and protecting victims in the event of tension. The authority of traditional chiefs. Traditional chiefs were listened to and respected for their authority. They were unchallenged and depended exclusively on the support of the population rather than on guns, military and financial support. They had no political attachments and were therefore generally non-partisan. That's why they could eventually successfully bring calm in the event of dissension or disagreement. In summary, we have seen that joking alliance, palaver, proverbs, tales, interethnic marriages, and traditional institutions are some internal African methods and tools for conflict prevention and resolution. To better address conflicts in Africa today, these tools need to be perpetuated and made dynamic by their inclusion in national education policies and school curricula, their recognition at the academic level through research and publication, their popularization through community campaigns and meetings by organizations such as World Beyond War. We can also note that in most of the methods examined, moral and humanitarian value are given pride of place. And this is precisely what Field of Peace founder Charles Bush advocates in his book A Promise to Our Children, which is a humanitarian approach to fighting conflict, an approach which looks at love, empathy, and altruism as the most effective and accessible weapon against war. As we have seen, we can draw these values from African oral tradition. Let's tell children tales that on the one hand condemn indifference and selfishness, and on the other makes them see the merits of solidarity and virtue in general. Let's raise people's awareness, not just during campaigns, but also and above all in the everyday life around us, because there is no doubt our common humanity and morals should complement all other peace-building efforts. Before we end with this presentation, we can't refrain from sharing a commitment that is a promise made to the younger children, as they are the most innocent victims whose lives are taken by war. Since as human beings, we can't be indifferent in front of a baby suffering or a baby being killed, this commitment can be a common ground where everybody finds a reason to commit in peace building. This is how the promise goes. I will not be a part of the killing of any child, no matter how lofty the reason. Not my neighbor's child, not my child, not the enemy's child. Not by bomb, not by bullet, not by looking the other way. I will be the power that is peace. All right, let us all be the power that is peace. Thanks for your kind and keen attention.
Well, there is no words to add, I think, after such a presentation. So please, let's move to this video we have prepared for you, full of music and peace ceremonies. Greta Orgi, if you can start the video, please.
Avez-vous déjà assisté à la cérémonie traditionnelle des jumeaux en pays d'Amérique? Voici l'un des moments culturels les plus fascinants et séduisants de la culture de cette région. Arrivons à temps pour assister au grand rituel de choix qui aura lieu le jour suivant. Mais avant, nous voulons comprendre les fondements de cette pratique. Nous rencontrons une des jumelles et qui nous en dit plus. Une question de purification. D'importantes dépenses financières. À côté d'elle, un tani ou encore père des jumeaux accompagne les femmes de sa double cloche. Meïtan Roger sera notre guide tout au long de la journée de demain. Pour commencer, il nous parle de cette danse exécutée par ces femmes au milieu de la nuit. Danse qui...
La danse s'appelle le si et manier. On danse comme ça pour faire sortir la malédiction dans cette famille. Toute malédiction. Et pour souhaiter la chance dans cette famille.
Nous en profitons.
Pays Bamileke. La vision du monde matériel est centrée sur l'homme comme étant la vérité totale des choses, le résumé du monde environnemental. La vie terrestre n'est qu'une vie pour les Africains. Les ancêtres sont plus forts que les hommes, ceci grâce à leur proximité avec Dieu. Le Tout-Puissant Si révèle la contingence de l'homme et ses limites. Dans ce milieu traditionnel,
il arrive que vous ayez des problèmes et que, en réunissant seulement vos frères et sœurs et vous leur faites manger, ça résout le problème que vous avez. Si on ne résout pas ce problème, ça va se répercuter sur sa descendance, sur des générations, comme on dit. Donc c'est pour cela qu'on est appelé à offrir un sacrifice à cet ancêtre qui a eu des différends pour dissiper le malentendu.
So as the last mural was saying, it's a vivons ensemble in French, and it's let's live together. That's really the message. But before we close this day, we have the honor today to have with us Katie Kelly. She's the president of World Beyond War, and she's going to tell us a few words. Please, Katie.
Well, thank you, Marian, and thank you, everyone, for this very dynamic time together. You know, there's a lot of focus on the hostage crisis right now in Gaza. But what we learned from Alex at the very beginning of our morning actually shows, I think, that the Western powers hold the whole world hostage with nuclear weapons. And Alex helped us see that, you know, one of the main funding groups outside of my own city no longer wants to fund the effort to stop nuclear weapons. But these weapons, nuclear weapons, conventional weapons, new weapons, the merchants of death hold all of us hostage and threaten us and try to divide us. And dear friends in Africa, we must tell you how sorry, how very, very sorry we are for all of the cruelties and the abuses of the master-slave relationship that extracted so much of your wealth in human bodies and in natural resources. And that's what was used to build the prosperity of Europe and the West and the North, as Wolfgang showed us. And it was wrong, and we must never, ever try to imitate those wrongful structures that have been taken at the price of our common humanity. So I thank you today, and I sense, you know, Obi Jane from Nigeria, I think really in a way comes from a country that's a bit of a beacon, you know, the largest country that people know the least about. But when you think about it, there are more English speakers now in Africa, not to mention Africa and diaspora, more English speakers than live in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand combined. And so you have the power to change, to reshape the language. And it's happening through your movies, through your writing, through the many ways, the many, many ways that African community development is changing our world. And so it's my deep and fervent hope that we can continue to learn from you and to certainly remember that we are many, they are few. Those rich people Wolfgang spoke about, those fantastically exploitative, rich and wealthy groups are quite few and quite dangerous. And so we must speak up, we must speak out, we catch courage from one another. Ultimately, we are all part of one another. And so I wish each of you well in the development of chapters. It's very exciting to know what could be coming around the corner. We face ecological collapse. And so we really have to collaborate together and bring forth our strongest resources, which often have to do with those personal relationships that were mentioned again and again, and which have been celebrated under the Palaver tree and throughout your communities in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Katie. And before we end this conference, let's remember that the blue that we all wear at World Beyond the War, it's the blue of the sky, the huge, big blue sky we all live under, all together. And now I let Guy close and conclude these beautiful 3 days we have had all together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marion. I'm truly amazed by the enthusiasm that I saw over the 3 days around the discussions on Africa, which are centered on World Beyond War's vision of ending all wars, whether they are in Africa or elsewhere in the world. So I can't believe that we made this conference. We did it, and thanks to our collective effort, we could make it. And we didn't just do it; we did it very well, despite the connectivity issues that many of us encountered. Many wanted to participate, but could not because of internet. So as we can see, internet connectivity remains a major problem for the advancements of peace work in Africa. Before the conference, we noted a great interest across the world, with a big number of people registering to attend this conference. So during the conference, we had a satisfactory turnout, including people who connected despite late hours or being in holidays in their respective countries. So we are grateful for that and thank them for that. The conference also gave rise to a number of intentions of creating the chapters of World Beyond War in other countries in Africa, which is a good sign that we are moving indeed. So there is an African proverb that says, when everyone cleans his yard, the whole village becomes clean. So this is a literal translation from French. I don't know exactly how it translates into English, but this is the reality. By this, I want to mean that the World Beyond War African Peace Conference showed just how much Africans want to clean up their continent and how much they are calling on the whole world to do the same, so that we can all put an end to the war industry. The countries that export weapons to Africa must realize that These weapons cause damage and that humanity suffers as a result. During the conference, I noted several appeals formulated in different ways that can help make Africa the cradle of peace that it once was. First, the World Beyond War chapters in Africa should strengthen their capacities on peace and security agendas and on developing peace projects to play an active role in building peace in their countries. The governments of African countries should resort to mediation and dialogue as means of conflict resolution to the detriment of military response, which beyond the exacerbation of violence, reinforce the culture of militarization. African leaders should have a more equitable distribution of support and protection to populations in vulnerable settings to reduce disparities and disproportionate effect of wars. And the international community should give priority to human security by reallocating military spending to humanitarian causes, mobilizing substantial resources to invest in peace and address the effects of war on human rights and human security. Yes, so as Wolfgang was saying, should have avoid the national egoistic thinking. As we conclude this conference, we keep the door open for questions, contributions, and opportunities for collaboration. Because this was just the first conference, we are hoping to have the next year, because the idea is to have a yearly World Beyond War Africa Peace Conference. So in the meantime, we continue to unite our voices in our countries and at the continental level. We must, with the help of World Beyond War at global level, develop a peace project for Africa based on endogenous conflict prevention mechanisms, some of which have been explored today in the presentation by Judith. So let everyone commit to doing something to make the world a more peaceful place after this conference. In Cameroon, we are going to start by joining the 16 days of activism campaign against gender-based violence. So see you next year for the second World Beyond War African Peace Conference. So I thank you very much for attention. Thank you for being here. Thanks.